Hello, and welcome to Nursing Research Tips, a show dedicated to sharing best practices, tips, and other resources within the areas of nursing research and evidence based practice. I'm your host, Jenny Barrow, Associate Professor of Undergraduate Nursing, who specializes in teaching students real world content to help transform their future nursing practice. I enjoy taking the boring world of research and EBP and making it come alive for my students, and that's what I intend to do with this podcast as well. On today's episode, I have some special guests from my university's undergraduate nursing research and EBP course. Makayla Benoit, Whitney Lovell, Alyssa Simon, Savana Schlicher, and Taja Wiltz are joining us to discuss their evidence-based practice project. Before they get started with their discussions, I want to let our listeners know that I have shared a copy of these students' evidence-based practice poster to accompany this podcast episode. This can be found in the show notes of the episode on whatever podcast device you're listening to. Now, without further delay, let's turn the show over to Whitney to get us started.
Hello, my name is Whitney Lovell, and on behalf of my other group members, Alyssa Simon, Makayla Benoit, Savana Schlicher, and Taja Wiltz, I'd like to welcome you to our project podcast. We have completed this work throughout the semester in our undergraduate nursing research and evidence-based practice course. And throughout this podcast, we'll be engaging in a discourse regarding our work titled Night Shift Errors. All members of our group affiliated with this project are undergraduate nursing students at McNeese State University, and we are a part of McNeese's College of Nursing and Health Professions, which is located in Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Thank you for introducing your team and your overall project topic to our listeners, Whitney. As a former night shift nurse in the acute care hospital setting myself, this topic intrigues me. Likely, several members in your group will also work night shifts at some point in your future nursing careers. So, Whitney, can you tell our listeners a bit more about why you feel this topic is important?
Our project revolves around the idea that night shift scheduling within the nursing field is a contributor to higher medication error rates, the causation of which is sleep deprivation, higher patient-to-nurse ratios, and the natural standpoint of disregarding the circadian rhythm. We felt this project was important to engage in since some of us have experienced night shift, engage with night shift staff, and since it's an important discussion for the health and safety of both nurses and their patients. Before diving into the rest of the project, some important things to understand is that sleep deprivation is when a person fails to receive the recommended amount of sleep, which is generally considered to be 7 to 12 hours. Losing this sleep results in cognitive deficits such as difficulty concentrating. Another important thing to keep in mind is that in the healthcare system, a night shift is generally defined as a shift lasting from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So it's 12 hours straight in which the nurse and other healthcare professionals are expected to stay awake and take care of patients. We also feel it's important to mention that there are limitations to our project due to a lack of research surrounding error rates during night shift. Errors during night shift that occur with nurses and other healthcare professionals not only pertain to them and their patient, but it pertains to healthcare systems and populations as a total. Now, why is that? Well, the nurse is directly impacted by potentially losing their license over the error, and then the patient may lose their life depending on the severity of the error. However, indirectly, further stress is placed on healthcare systems and individual hospitals because these errors may impact staffing and the hospital's reputability within the community. Once the system's reputability is impacted, it will affect their regional population, which may no longer trust that system to take care of them due to the medical errors occurring within. Clearly, it's imperative that further research and comparison be conducted on this topic for the nurses, patients, and regional populations' health and the reputability of nursing as a profession.
Thanks for defining what sleep deprivation and nursing specific night shifts are, Whitney. At the beginning of any project, it's vital to define your core concepts so your listeners understand how you're using those terms specifically. This is especially important since some of our listeners may not be nurses. So, you provided our listeners with a solid background for why this overall topic is significant for the nursing profession. Savannah, can you tell us what your group did next within this overall EBP project?
Now that we have introduced some background information on our evidence-based practice topic, I want to share our group's evidence-based practice question with our listeners. This question was used to guide our research project, and it was used in the PIO format, Population, Intervention, and Outcome. This question was, in the acute care hospital setting, is there a correlation between the average number of hours of sleep a night shift nurse receives and the rate of medication errors? The population in this question is night shift nurses in the acute care hospital setting. Intervention is the average number of hours of sleep the night shift nurse receives, and outcome is medication error rates. It's important to remember while moving through the rest of this podcast that this question was used to guide our research, and specifically, we were looking for the correlation between average number of hours of sleep the night shift nurse receives and the rate of medication errors.
Thanks for sharing your group's PIO question with our listeners, Savannah. The question served to focus your group's investigations into the literature. Can you tell us more about how you used the PIO question to help you find published research studies about your selected topic?
We used our group's PIO question to create some keywords to search the following databases: the McNeese Library, the National Institute of Health PubMed, which is a resource that provides access to biomedical literature, and the Patient Safety Network, otherwise known as PSNet, which is an online collection of the most up-to-date patient safety content. We used a variety of keywords including medication errors, med error prevention, cognition, day shift nursing, night shift nursing, fatigue, sleep deprivation, sleep-wake cycle, and sleep quality. All of these keywords are factors directly or indirectly related to our PIO question and were used to help narrow down our search. There are multiple search limitations within our literature search. Our articles had to include the full text, be published within 2020 to 2025, they needed to be quantitative, they had to be a nursing journal subset, and they had to be peer-reviewed. All limitations that we have placed on our search help us narrow down the articles to the best fitting ones. During our search, there were many articles that researched the same thing, so it was rather difficult finding a variety of them that talked about different subjects. There also wasn't many that directly talked about med errors in the night shift. However, we were able to find multiple articles on multiple databases that were indirectly related to our PIO question, so we were able to string them together to form a conclusion.
I appreciate that you shared some helpful insights into your group's literature search process, Makayla. I also appreciate that you were transparent with our listeners regarding some of the struggles that your group encountered during your searches. Sometimes there's not a solid body of published literature surrounding a topic. In your future RN practice, when you come across a knowledge gap like this, it signals a need for more research studies. Since doing an actual research investigation was outside of the scope of this course, that was not really a viable solution for y'all. Sometimes the best evidence that we have on a topic isn't that great. That's one of the downfalls of EBP. That's when it becomes even more important for consumers of nursing research to critically appraise the evidence that actually is available to see if it's suitable for proposing practice changes. That's just some food for thought to store away for your future practice. Now, after your group reviewed these retrieved peer-reviewed studies, what key evidence did you discover pertaining to your group's PO question?
After conducting our literature search using the models previously described, we sorted through the study articles to find quality studies that specifically addressed our EBP question. Each group member was responsible for critically appraising one study article, and we synthesized the studies into a guiding group synthesis table to get a bigger picture of the state of the science surrounding our topic. Our EBP question is focused on if there is a correlation between the average number of hours of sleep night shift nurses receive and the rate of medication errors. Our group found key evidence to answer our question after conducting research on a variety of articles. Evidence from our chosen study articles identify a direct correlation between night shift nurses and their performance in the clinical setting. Evidence has shown just how important healthy sleep practices are for healthcare employees, especially night shift nurses. It is critical that night shift nurses adopt effective sleep strategies, not only for themselves, but for the patients who have placed their trust in their nurses' hands. Evidence has also shown the importance of hospital policies. It is crucial that hospital policies are put in place to support night shift nurses and their sleep habits. It is important that policies support the length of time between consecutive night shifts. This is essential for nurses to recover from the lack of sleep experienced during consecutive night shifts. Research suggests that measures should be put in place during night shifts to improve the fatigue healthcare employees experience, such as nap breaks. It was proven that 90-minute napping can be beneficial for nurses working longer shifts. With a lack of sleep, nurses may put the health of their patients in danger. It is likely for fatigued nurses to make mistakes. Adverse events, such as medication errors, can occur when nurses are fatigued. It is not just the job of the nurse to ensure healthy sleep habits. It is the facility's job as well. With hospitals being short-staffed and policies not being put in place, nurses and patients have to suffer. The facility has to support its nurses. As a result, their patients will remain safe and receive quality care. When hospitals do not support the sleep practices and well-being of their nurses, patients' lives are at risk. Quality patient care and safety is the ultimate goal, and this starts with the facility and its policies.
Excellent discussion of the studies that your group reviewed, Alyssa. You discussed some general trends that your group found after reviewing your selected research studies, especially pertaining to the nurses adopting good sleep hygiene and the workplaces advocating for adequate rest through staffing policies and even mid-shift interventions while at work. Taja, can you tell our listeners about some additional key implications that nurses across all clinical specialties should consider based on the literature your group reviewed?
Our group reviewed the information and identified several key implications for nursing practice related to night shift errors. The importance of effective sleep management programs for nurses who are experiencing exhaustion is one of the most significant takeaways. By providing structured programs, it is possible to enhance overall well-being and decrease errors during night shift. Improving performance and patient safety requires nurses to be educated on the benefits of maintaining effective sleep patterns and how to ensure adequate rest. To promote safer working conditions and ensure nurses have enough recovery time between shifts, staffing and scheduling practice should be reassessed. Nurses who work in high-stress environments like ER, ICU, and long-term care facilities where fatigue-related errors can have serious consequences are particularly affected by these findings. By supporting adequate sleep and structured rest breaks during shifts, hospital and healthcare organizations can implement policy changes that improve patient safety and reduce errors. Nursing professionals can reduce fatigue-related risks by incorporating these changes into practice, which ultimately leads to improved patient outcomes and a safer work environment. The main concern is to ensure patient safety and staff safety.
Thanks, Taja. You provided our listeners with some helpful takeaways meant to improve sleep patterns of night shift nurses within acute care hospitals. So, Makayla, did your group find that there are any gaps in the present literature that may require further research investigations in the future?
After concluding our research, there are still some knowledge gaps in the published literature regarding our topic. Therefore, our group created some implications for future research. Because 12-hour shifts, not only in night shift nursing, are strenuous and exhausting, there should be experimentation with different work schedules and shifts to determine the best one that reduces fatigue and improves patient outcomes. There should also be more research that focuses on med errors exclusively and how to reduce them. By determining the range of sleep in hours that maximizes performance, this will be beneficial to not only nurses, but the whole population. Knowing this number will provide a goal for nurses to achieve and ensure that they are receiving enough rest to be at full capacity at work, in turn reducing med errors made. If facilities were to implement the ability for night shift nurses to take a nap during their shift, studies on ways to have better sleep quality would be a requirement. There are many distractions, not only in the hospital, that can make sleeping difficult for nurses. Establishing a guideline to a good sleep environment would facilitate better sleep quality. The goal of all of these research implications mentioned are to improve patient outcomes and reduce med errors made.
Okay, so your group has given us a lot of excellent information about the current state of the science surrounding your selected clinical practice topic. After all of the research studies your group reviewed, including considerations for study weaknesses and continued gaps in the present literature, what was your group's overall literature-based answer to your original PO question?
All of the research studies that our group reviewed, we were able to determine an evidence-based answer to our evidence-based practice question. There is a strong and significant correlation between number of hours of sleep a night shift nurse receives and the quality performance at work. We were able to see this through our research articles that our group used to guide us in our research project during the semester. For example, in the Durkin article, we were able to see that sleep health was impacted by health factors such as caffeine consumption during the shift, satisfaction with current weight, intake of fruits and vegetables, and frequency and duration of exercise. In the Watanabe article, we were able to see that nurses experienced less drowsiness after nap breaks and less fatigue at the end of a night shift if they took a nap of at least 90 minutes when working a 16-hour shift. In the Min article, we were able to see that fatigue level of nurses could be lowered if they had more sleep between their shifts, and that nurses with high fatigue levels are more likely to make errors when caring for their patients. We were able to identify a correlation between medication errors and the number of hours of sleep a night shift nurse receives in the FRAG article. The results showed that the cause of medication administration errors and near misses was identified by fatigue in at least 82% of studies. Fatigue can lead to decreased attention, vigilance, and decision-making ability, which can result in more errors, and that fatigue is associated with poor nursing performance and patient safety. And the risk of errors increases for night shift nurses due to sleep deprivation. While this does show a correlation between medication errors and the number of hours of sleep a night shift nurse receives, there's not enough evidence-based practice research out there to directly and significantly identify a correlation between these two things that our group was able to find, which led us to believe that there is an unclear correlation between these two things and that more research is needed. I've learned that evidence-based practice and reviewing research is extremely important to the nursing profession, as it is always important to stay up to date on all of the new drugs, treatment options, and different evidence-based practice things to incorporate into our nursing so that we are able to better care for our patients. And I will personally use what I've learned in this project to make me a better nurse by identifying different things I can do to decrease the risk of medication errors when I am working a night shift.
Thanks for wrapping up your group's discussion, Savannah. I'm proud of each of you for integrating the content that we've discussed in our undergraduate nursing research and EBP course into a real-world literature search process. One point that I do want to clarify for our listeners relates to something you just mentioned. You and your other group members mentioned the term correlation several times, especially since it's a primary component of your group's EBP question. For our listeners who may not be as familiar with research terms like correlation, I wanted to clarify that a correlation is simply a relationship or an association between two main pieces of the study data. Researchers establish correlations by first collecting data through various means. In your particular studies, those were likely surveys that were collected and the answers were turned into numbers. Once researchers have those numerical values, they can plug those numbers into various statistical software programs to run different tests to see how closely, if at all, the two values relate to each other. Sometimes, as the value of one group of numbers increases, the value of the other group of numbers also increases. But sometimes, the values move in opposite directions. In your group's EBP project, you were trying to determine, through a review of published research studies, if decreases in the hours of nightly sleep on average increased the risk for or incidence of medication errors. Anyone with any time spent in a research methods classroom has likely heard this famous maxim: correlation does not equal causation. How many of you, if you're being honest, just repeated that with me while I said it? I thought this bore mentioning at this point as we close your episode. Even if there is a statistically significant relationship established via statistical testing between hours of sleep and the incidence of medication errors, that does not mean that one of those things caused changes in the other. As you mentioned, Savannah, a lot of other factors can contribute to a nurse's sleep health, such as caffeine consumption and overall health, among other things. Therefore, what you're not saying is that lack of sleep causes increase in medication errors. However, if the literature supports a strong connection between those two factors, then it behooves the scientific community to investigate these relationships further, while also studying the effectiveness of interventions aimed at improving overall sleep health of night shift nurses. It seems that this is a general topic area that is ripe for future studies, as both Makayla and Savannah mentioned. So as we close, I would also like to thank our listeners for going on this journey with us. It's a good reminder for all of us to assess our current sleep practices to see if we are setting ourselves up for success in our jobs, whether those jobs are in the area of nursing or healthcare or not. It's hard to properly take care of other people when we're not taking care of ourselves. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today.